Bruins coaching favorites, most untouchable prospects, and the best rivalries of my lifetime. Let's get into it on a brand new mailbag episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Friday, May 30th. Where has this month gone? I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's been a long time since our Bruins played a game, but I very much appreciate you tuning in to Locked On Boston Bruins, your favorite team every single day. Today on the podcast, I'm doing a mailbag episode where I'm going to answer a few of some great questions that came in via YouTube and on social media. Before we get into that, a quick reminder, you can follow the podcast on social media at X, Blue Sky, Instagram, where else? TikTok, even Threads. You can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets and the NHL at large for about 20 years now. And again, today we're going to do a mailbag episode. I'm going to answer a question about the latest on the head coach search. We're also going to talk about untouchable young players for the Boston Bruins in a trade. And I'm going to talk about some of the best rivalry moments of my lifetime following this team. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. I very much do appreciate it. All right, so let's get into it. Listener questions answered, from the coaching front runners to key trade chips that should not be touched. Let's start with, who are you liking as the next Bruins head coach? I've got my Marco Sturm, and Fluto Shinzawa of The Athletic, I believe last night, posted an article saying that there were 3 individuals who were in process of having their final interviews. There was one on Wednesday, one yesterday, and then Marco Sturm was scheduled to have his last interview today. The other 2 were Jay Leach and Mitch Love. Now, personally, and I said it the other day on the podcast, I'm all about Sturm. He's a Bruins, I don't want to say legend, but he was a fan favorite as the Bruin after being acquired from the San Jose Sharks in that Joe Thornton trade. Obviously not a popular trade, not a fair return, but Sturm did have some productive seasons with the Bruins and also had that memorable Winter Classic performance, fight, scoring the game-winning goal, etc. I've had some people say, who cares what he did as a player? What sets him apart as the top candidate for the Bruins job? Well, he has international coaching experience. Then he led an upstart Germany team to a silver medal at the 2018 Winter Olympics. It was not a best-on-best tournament, but still, to have Germany, which is a relatively small hockey country, there's only one prominent German that I know of in the NHL right now, Leon Draisaitl. He wasn't even there. To do that is quite an accomplishment. He has been an assistant in Los Angeles for the past few years. He's been head coach of the Ontario Reign of the AHL. He's helped develop talents like Quentin Byfield, Brandt Clark, 2 prominent young guys on the Kings for the foreseeable future. He's a great communicator, commands respect, and can relate to both veterans and prospects alike. So he's a guy, not just because of his history with the team, and actually fully apart from his history with the team. Even if he hadn't played for the Bruins in 2010 and 2005 to 2010, I would still be a big proponent of Sturm as the next head coach. There's another guy that I would be very happy with as well, and that would be Mitch Love. He's just 40 years old, concluded his second season as an assistant for the Washington Capitals. He is a two-time AHL Coach of the Year. He's young, he's intense, he can build a strong track record of development and could bring that new school edge that perhaps Sturm doesn't necessarily bring to the table. Don Sweeney, in his year-end news conference, said he wants the team to evolve offensively, especially with younger players, and integrate them. But if you don't defend in the NHL, you don't have sustained success. Love was in charge of Washington's defense this past season. Capitals allowed 2.79 goals per game, 8th lowest in the NHL. Sturm, on the other hand, trained under guys like Todd McLellan, John Stevens. Kings have a philosophy of defensive zone structure, airtight goaltending. So both of those guys, I think, would be pretty popular decisions. I'm not as in on Jay Leach, to be honest. I think he has a great resume. He knows the organization well, especially with some Bruins prospects like Mason Lohrei, Jeremy Swayman. He's a safe pick, though, and maybe not the bold move that the Bruins need right now. He was already allowed to pursue opportunities elsewhere. He was an assistant in Seattle for a year or two, came back. I just think they need fresh eyes, a fresh voice, and someone who can really reinvigorate things with that new voice. Now, a wild card potentially added to the mix here. Everydayers will remember a few weeks ago, I was a huge proponent of going for Misha Donskov of the Dallas Stars. Now, Dallas was eliminated from the playoffs last night after a pretty curious decision by head coach Pete DeBoer to pull Jake Ottinger and not put him back once the Stars kind of found their game, to their detriment. They lost last night. So DeBoer, I mean, you could argue that's a fireable offense. Don Sweeney said he wasn't going to wait until the playoffs were over to pursue candidates. But with the Stars being bounced early and Donskov assumedly being the guy that they were keying in on that was still in the playoffs, there's still time here to make that move, to contact the Stars, fit an interview in, if indeed they allow him permission to speak to the Bruins, and if the Bruins have not already made up their minds. Donskov, development and analytics-minded assistant from Dallas. He was an assistant for Team Canada, the Four Nations face-off. I would love to still see them pursue him, but if you're going for impact and connection to Bruins culture, Sturm is my guy. If you want to bet on upside, Mitch Love is a very intriguing swing. I'm not as big on the safe pick. That would be Jay Leach here as head coach of the Boston Bruins. Now, whoever takes over is going to inherit some exciting young talent, but not all may stick around. We're going to talk trade chips here as the podcast continues. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live, with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You can also get in on the action with respect to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Put some money down on the Edmonton Oilers or the Florida Panthers, Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, or maybe Alexander Barkov to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. $5 bet. If it hits, you will get $200 in bonus bets to add to the excitement. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Again, head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Today we're answering some mailbag questions. We've already touched on the head coach search, where there's reportedly 3 finalists at least for the job. I didn't mention interim head coach Joe Sacco. Doesn't seem to be much smoke there in terms of naming him as the next head coach. Really appears as though Leach, Love, and Sturm are the finalists, with Donskov perhaps being the wild card there. I'd be fine with Sturm or Love, either one of those, as the next head coach. Next question came from X as well, and it was this. Mason Lohrei, Fraser Minton, Matt Poitras. Which one is most untradeable? If the Bruins were to trade for a young star from another team and had to part with the one, which would it be? This is a great question, and it really kind of depends what you're getting back in return. But if we're talking raw potential, positional need, and organizational depth, my pick might be Mason Lohrei. He has dynamic offensive abilities, skating. He's got the size, and on the left side, which is a bit of a rarity in the NHL. He's shown flashes of being like a power play quarterback. He's shown flashes of high-end offensive talent. Yes, he is still kind of raw, and we saw that with his league leading low plus minus of like minus 43, but he was kind of thrust into a position where he was taking on bigger minutes than he should have been at this point in his career because of those injuries to Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm this season. He's an RFA, so they can get cost-controlled top 4 defense. Lohrei fits that need better than anyone else in the system. And we talk about how the Bruins are thin down the middle, prospect-wise. Well, that's true of defense as well. They don't really have another surefire guy who can make the NHL as early as this season or next. There are some possibilities, some question mark prospects, Frederick Brunet, Loki Johansson, but Lohrei is like the only guy who is a surefire established NHLer for years to come. Yeah, he's got some question marks, some warts, but if he were to be made available, you can bet that there would be teams looking to add his upside. Now, Matt Poitras is, of course, also a close call. He's creative, he's poised, he's NHL ready, seemingly after spending the majority of this past season down in the AHL. I've always kind of compared him to David Krejci. He reminds me so much of that magician with the puck, his ability to elude defenders, spin around, find some space, get the puck to the front of the net. His size and durability could become question marks, but he could very well be a middle 6 center for this team for years to come, and that's hard to give up. Perhaps the most tradable out of the group would be Fraser Minton. He's got upside, limited NHL experience, didn't really impress too much in the Calder Cup playoffs, but he's a smart two-way center. And if someone's prying, he might be the guy that you include to land a top winger. He was not a draft pick of the Bruins. He, of course, was acquired from the Toronto Maple Leafs along with a first-round pick in exchange for Brandon Carlo, which, looking back, is a very nice piece of business by Don Sweeney. He might be a guy, though, that you could include in a deal to upgrade at the wing or even down the middle. I really do like Fraser Minten. I hope that he is able to crack the team this season. But if the Bruins want to swing big, one of these names is likely going the other way. Lohrei might be the last one that I'm putting in the deal. I talked recently about pursuing Trevor Zegras from the Anaheim Ducks. Marco Rossi's available. The Bruins have a big trade chip in the 7th overall pick at the 2025 NHL entry draft. That's going to be a way for them to perhaps add a center to the pipeline. But if you're looking for a retool instead of a rebuild and want to add some more NHL ready talent, maybe you flip a Poitras or a Minten or a Lysell for someone who's more established at the NHL level right now, like a Trevor Zegras or a Marco Rossi. I got another question about RFAs perhaps to pursue. I'm going to tackle that in a full episode next week. I've already talked about Matthew Nyes and giving up some picks in order to sign him to an offer sheet. But the reality is they have some, like the deal that the Bruins pulled off with the Colorado Avalanche was kind of a perfect trade. They trade Charlie Coyle, who's kind of an aging center. They bring in Casey Middlestat, who's got more offensive upside, and a top prospect in Will Zellers. Those are the kind of moves you want to make. So maybe they flip a Pavel Zacha or somebody for someone younger but with more upside to a team who's looking to add a complementary, defensively responsible center. The Bruins, again, need to evolve offensively, and part of that includes taking some risks on some players who may not fit the quote-unquote Bruins mold in terms of size, grit, defensive responsibility, two-way prowess, and a guy like Poitras or Minten could be floated in a package like that so that you don't have to give up the 7th overall pick on top of that. So out of those three guys, I'm a huge Matt Poitras guy. Obviously, watched him here in Guelph in junior and think he has tremendous upside. His size, is a bit of a concern. We've already seen him get a major shoulder injury. Perhaps he was rushed a bit because of circumstances 2 seasons ago where they were very short at center. Fraser Minten, very intrigued by him. I think that was a great deal by Don Sweeney to get him and a first for Brandon Carlo, to get Zellers and Middlestat for Charlie Coyle. Huge. And they do have some assets now in order to try to make a bigger trade. And we'll see if that is on Don Sweeney's radar here as the offseason carries on. If the Bruins do want to swing big, one of those names is likely going the other way. Now we've talked coaches, future stars. Let's finish off with something a little more nostalgic, talking about my favorite rivalries as a lifelong Bruins fan. Off the top, every day I say I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, been covering this team for various outlets since that Joe Thornton trade that I mentioned earlier. And I got another question via YouTube. As a lifelong Bruins fan, what are your favorite rivalries? And where do the defunct Hartford Whalers fit among those? Oh, such a great question. So many great and painful memories that this stirs up. Let's start era by era with a little love for the Whalers along the way, actually. Now, everydayers will remember I told the story before that my dad was a Boston Bruins fan, a Bobby Orr fan specifically, and I kind of inherited that fandom from him despite being born in Toronto. You know, most people born at the hospital that I was born at grow up to be Maple Leafs fans. But me, we didn't live in Toronto for too long. We moved east to Brockville and then Ottawa. The Senators were not there yet at that time. So I really took on that Bruins fandom from my dad. My sister, on the other hand, was a big Edmonton Oilers fan, specifically Mark Messier. So when the Bruins met the Oilers in the 1990 Cup final, I kind of went all in on that Bruins fandom just to kind of irk my older sister as younger siblings do. But looking back, that 1990 Cup final was probably the first heartbreak that I suffered as a young sports fan. You had Cam Neely, Ray Bourque in their heydays with the Boston Bruins, Andy Moog in net for the Bruins, going up against a post-Gretzky Oilers squad. But my sister chose wisely, I guess. She was deep in on her Marc Messier fandom. He had like 130 points for the Oilers that season. And Bill Ranford kind of stood on his head, stole that series. The Bruins lost in 5 after a triple overtime game 1. And that was perhaps, well, it was the furthest that Neely and Bourque ever got, because in another rivalry that was big when I was a kid, the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Bruins lost to Mario Lemieux and company in back-to-back conference finals in 1991 and 1992. The Penguins went on to win the Cup in both of those years. So they weren't able to take advantage of the post-Gretzky Oilers, who obviously still had a very strong squad. And then they ran up against Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Kevin Stevens, and company. And those were very, very good teams that the Bruins just could not get past. So extremely heartbreaking to not get a cup out of that core for me was, I consider the Penguins and Oilers to be rivals despite that, or because of that, even though I'm kind of cheering for the Oilers to beat the Panthers here in the Stanley Cup final this year. Obviously, one of the biggest rivalries was the Montreal Canadiens. It really came to a head for me in like 2000 to 2011. 2004, the Bruins had a perfect opportunity to go very deep in the Stanley Cup final, or in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That was the year, of course, where they went all in, got Sergei Gonchar, Michael Nylander at the trade deadline. But it was also the year that Joe Thornton suffered a rib injury late in the season, rendered ineffective in the playoffs. Still, the Bruins had a 3-1 series lead. They blew it. I'll never forget watching Kovalev kind of fake that injury and give away. But that series, the blown 3-1 series lead, really, that was a tough one for sure. In 2008, the Bruins were the 8th seed. They pushed number 1 Montreal to 7 games. It was kind of the beginning of that next wave for the Bruins that they were able to. It was Claude Julien also facing his old team. Some younger guys making their debuts for the Bruins in the playoffs. And then, of course, in 2011, it just all blew up with the Max Pacioretty, Zdeno Chara stanchion incident that led some Canadiens fans to like call the cops. You had the Bruins down in that series after losing games 1 and 2 at home. The famous trip to like Placid to kind of reset. Nathan Horton coming up big with some overtime heroics, including the Game 7 winner. Wasn't just a series win. It was like an emotional hurdle on the way to a Stanley Cup. And it was even made even more special by sweeping Philadelphia in the next round after the reverse sweep the year before. Now, there's a couple underrated ones that come up. The Buffalo Sabres, of course, 2010 playoffs, upset the Sabres. Then, of course, lost in dramatic fashion to the Philadelphia Flyers in the next round. But it was Milan Lucic's hit on Ryan Miller in November of 2011 that really lit the fuse. They did have some playoff series in the 90s that I remember distinctly watching on my parents' little square box TV. But that incident was probably the pinnacle of it. Ryan Miller was furious. Buffalo didn't respond. And it kind of broke the Buffalo Sabres, to be honest. And it showed the contrast and toughness that separated the two teams. Now, when it comes to the Whalers, they were division rivals until their move to Carolina in 1997. Great geographic rivalry. Bruins often took over the Hartford Civic Center. Always physical, but the Bruins always had the edge as kind of like the bigger city. If you're old enough, names like Pat Verbeek, Ron Francis still spark memories. I have a Whalers snapback because that logo, in my opinion, is unmatched. I actually had more disdain for this franchise once they moved to Carolina. And I think back to that 2009 series, Scott Walker scoring the game-winning goal in overtime in Game 7. I was actually in Scotland at that time, and I watched the game on tape delay the next morning without having – it was kind of before – I think I signed up for Twitter like right around then, so I didn't have it ruined. I was able to watch it on tape delay on the TSN website. And I really don't like either how the Hurricanes kind of co-opt the Whalers look as well. Like, you uprooted the franchise, stole it from Hartford. Stop celebrating the Whalers legacy as if it's your own. So that to me ratchets it up a little bit. Look, every era had a different villain, but for me, it's always going to be Montreal. It hasn't been super hot since 2011, where the Bruins exercised a lot of demons and have had the upper hand ever since as the better team. Canadiens have been rebuilding. Canadiens made the playoffs this year. So that's kind of flopped a little bit, but it won't really come back until they meet in the playoffs. And maybe that'll happen in the near future. Obviously, Toronto has been the focus as of late. I don't consider that as an all-time rivalry, although it's been very hot since 2013. But again, how much of a rivalry is it if the Bruins just consistently win, right? For now, anyways. I'll always have a soft spot for those underrated matchups, though, including the Whalers. And when it comes to Whalers lore, I mean, I just always love their logo, their look, and have fond memories of the Whalers, not like those bitter memories that others might have. Anyways, thanks to everyone who sent in questions. Keep them coming at ENC McLaren or Locked NHL Bruins on X or on the YouTube comments. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Do check out the Locked On NHL Game Night podcast next, which is a recap of every game every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Local analysis on a national scale. You can find it on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. We'll be back on Monday with more Bruins talk, maybe a coaching update. If a coach is announced over the weekend, I'll be sure to drop a short on YouTube and on Reels on TikTok. So please do follow along so that you never miss a thing. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll talk to you here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.